So Locke's told us that he doesn't think that there are any innate ideas in our minds. This is important for a couple of reasons. This is, first, a substantial disagreement with Descartes, who, as you remember, thinks that we have an innate idea of, among other things, God. Locke will disagree. This is also important because it means that anything we want to know, we need to go out and find. We can't just sit back and figure it out from what we know already, because there's nothing that we know innately. Now, we'll see later he's going to get around the problem of being able to know some things without evidence, but those won't be innate still. We'll see that later on. So the first argument he's going to look at for innate ideas is based on universal assent. So basically, he's going to say, well, are there any ideas out there that every single person would agree with? If that's so, the argument would go, then these seem like a good candidate to be innate. If there's something that everyone agrees with, maybe it's something that everyone knows. He's going to say, well, two problems here. First of all, there aren't any. You will find someone out there in the world to disagree with anything. This seems pretty plausible to me. Second of all, he's going to say, even if you could find some idea out there in the world that every single person would agree with, that's still not enough. And that's the case because they could all be wrong, right? You might get everyone to agree that the sky is green. First of all, that doesn't even mean that the sky actually is green, let alone that that idea came from nothing, from no contact with the world, that it's innate. And he makes these claims based on what he calls children and idiots. That's not very PC, but that concept wasn't really in existence when Locke was writing. He's going to say that, look, you can't have everybody universally assent, because children won't, right? You're not going to get a newborn baby to assent to much of anything. And even if you want to, throw children out, you might say, all right, well, only adults. Still, then you might have people who are mentally disabled in some way, or even just sort of slow, or just of a different mindset, who would substantially every time disagree. So he's going to look at a second possibility, and you can decide for yourself, of course, whether you think that he's said enough about the universal assent case after that. His second case he's going to look at is innateness via reason. So he's going to say, well, maybe there's nothing that the argument's going to run. He's going to argue against it. The argument's going to say, well, maybe there's nothing that everyone would assent to, but if they were reasonable enough, maybe they could sort of figure out that they really ought to assent to it. They could sort of discover, using their reason, and sort of examining our minds, then maybe that counts as innate. Locke's going to say, that's crazy. If we have to discover it, it's not innate. Right? If it was innate, then I should be born knowing it, born thinking it, born with it in my mind, present to me. And for that matter, he's going to use this example of math. So he's going to say, well, look, we can discover mathematical truths using reason alone, right? We don't need to go out and find numbers in the world to add up or subtract or multiply or divide, right? So it seems like then, if you want to follow this reason argument, now every mathematical truth would be innate. This seems crazy, right? I've added an example here at the bottom of the slide. Do you innately know what the answer is to 4,236 divided by 128? No, you probably don't, right? I didn't either. I used a calculator to find out that it is in fact 33.09375. It's not innate. It's just not there. And so Locke's going to say, look, reason is not going to do the trick for you. So he's going to say, look, here were the arguments for innate ideas. They didn't work that well. So where do all of our ideas come from? They need to come from somewhere, right? And this is another sort of Cartesian point. Descartes says, well, look, if the idea of God doesn't come from inside of me, it needs to come from somewhere else, right? And Descartes thinks that the idea came from God. Well, Locke says here are two places where our ideas could come from. First is experience. We can go out into the world and find them. This involves using our five senses. The other possibility is reflection, and this is the operations of the mind. So there are two ways to do this. Either we can think about other ideas we already have, so we can, go out and use experience, use our senses to find some ideas, and then think about them and get some different ideas. Or we can examine our mind itself, right? And so this is, maybe not necessarily going out into the world to find new ideas, but, I can look sort of into my head and say, well, what kind of a thing am I? What is my mind like? What is my thought process like? And this is sort of what Descartes did. So Locke's going to say, yeah, sure, Descartes, you can do this. This is fine. But he's going to disagree that Descartes has an innate idea of God, because he's going to say every idea needs to come from one of these two sources, either experience or reflection, and absolutely no other source, which means that they just cannot have been innate. So Locke's now going to have considered him to prove that there are no innate ideas, so he's going to move on from here to talk about what ideas are actually like and what we can do with them. We'll talk about that in our next video.